So let's talk a little bit more about designing for AR and augmenting humans, as I like to think of it. So I'm going to introduce you to a favorite book of mine, which, if you're a designer, you probably are very aware of. It's by a guy called Don Norman, and it's called The Design of Everyday Things. And the reason I really love this book is because it boils design down into some very, very core principles that are relevant no matter what type of design you do. So, if you're a print designer, an interaction designer, an industrial designer, user experience designer, whatever, this book is for you. It has a lot of really good examples in it, and it was written by a man who is a really big proponent of design thinking. And I'm also a very big proponent of design thinking because the core of design thinking is taking an empathetic approach to usability and human interaction. And I'm going to read just the very first paragraph of this book because Don Norman wrote this book twice, and he wrote it the first time, I think over 20 years ago, and he rewrote it just recently, and he rewrote it because a lot of the examples that he had in his previous version of the book had evolved in time, and they weren't really relevant anymore. So he decided to update the book and to give some more examples that were more relevant to where technology stands today. So, in his very first paragraph, he says, in the first edition of this book, then called Poet, The Psychology of Everyday Things, I started with these lines. This is the book I always wanted to write, except I didn't know it. Today I do know it, so I simply say, this is the book I always wanted to write, which I think is awesome because it gives you a really good insight into how Don Norman thinks. So, I think this is a really interesting thing that he says in the very beginning because basically he's acknowledging the fact that things change. And as I kind of preach a lot, that there's a lot of change happening right now, and it's really one of the most difficult things for human beings to handle. So for him to start his book basically acknowledging that things have changed, I think is a really powerful thing. And I think that right now, in AR and technology, we are actually designing the everyday things of tomorrow. So at some point, maybe he will update this book and the examples will be augmented reality or virtual reality or something like that. So I think that's a very interesting thing to think about. And if you do happen to pick up a copy of his book, you'll see how he boils everything down, and you'll see kind of the idea that there's things that we're designing in augmented reality right now that um, actually come directly from this book. And just some simple examples like how things are indicated to users, how you give them feedback as to things that are happening. So this is a really powerful thing to use. And I think that it's important as designers that we use this kind of thing in augmented reality because what we're doing right now is we're designing a whole new realm that doesn't have any limitations. So there's no like screen size, there's no paper size, there's nothing to actually prevent you from designing what you want to design. You're designing something in a 360 world that is unlimited. So, using things that are familiar to people and that work in successful interactions in other instances in society is a really powerful way to design. So, this is my sales pitch to get Don Norman's book and to design using his design thinking philosophy.